Bloody Mary legend. The legend of Bloody Mary. If you get scared very easily, I would suggest you grab your teddy bear, grab your favorite blanket, and get under it for this podcast. But first, let me say welcome to The Edge, here where we talk about all kinds of things, from witches to aliens to Bigfoot to the Lord Jesus Christ, God, a little bit of everything. There's no topic too big or too small for us to discuss here. But to make this all happen, I need you to do one thing still. Please, down below, subscribe. Please subscribe. Please subscribe. So, without further ado, let's get on with this. You know, I was out the other day and I stopped in the store, and I saw these two little kids. They were probably, I don't know, between 9 and 10, maybe 11. And there was a little boy and a little girl. And the little boy was trying to scare the little girl. I'm assuming they were brother and sister. And, you know, like little boys do, were picking. And he was saying, "Bloody Mary's going to get you. Bloody Mary's going to get you. Ooh." And she was yelling at him to shut up because it was scaring her. So the mother turns around and grabs the little boy's arm and says, "Stop that. Don't scare her like that." And said, "It's just a story, sweetie. Don't worry about it. It's just a story. It's not real." And I got to thinking, that would be a pretty good thing to teach some people. You know, Bloody Mary was a legend. Been around for many, many, many years. Remember hearing it when I was a kid. But I want you to understand and know that all these legends, all these stories that we told at campfires and things when we were kids, you know, all of them, most of the time, have some truth to them. Now it gets twisted along the way, but there's always some truth. Just like there's always some truth to every joke, there's some truth to every legend that you hear in some way, shape, or form. Even some of the movies that you see today are based somehow in some way on true stories. But before I get into that, I want to go and talk about the Bloody Mary thing. You know, it's kind of neat when I'm out and I'm about doing things throughout the day and throughout the week. I stay alert and listen to things that might come to me and give me ideas for the podcast and for the shows. Especially now until I can get out and start really doing some traveling and doing some on-site, you know, filming and stuff, filming on site. So I thought this would be a really good topic. So again, get your teddy bear, get your favorite blankie, and let's get ready to dive into the story of Bloody Mary, the true story of the Bloody Mary ghost. The Bloody Mary legend is an old legend that you probably heard way back in primary school. And even that your younger siblings and family members have probably heard too. Based on many urban legends and folklore that many believe was based upon true stories of the witch Mary Worth. That's who it was about. It was a witch named Mary Worth, W-O-R-T-H. The Bloody Mary story may seem somewhat innocent until you learn quite how the gruesome and violent tale is. And it has it all. It's what makes it so unique. It's got witches. It's got kidnappings. It's got burning a witch at the stake and magic. So let's take a ride through the spooky world of Mary Worth and learn just why and where the legend came from and why you still might not want to say Bloody Mary 3 times in a mirror. First, let's talk about the legend and how the legend came. Just think back to your childhood sleepovers and talking about ghosts and spooky stories and watching horror movies that are completely inappropriate for your age. You know, while you're, you know, piping your voice and making it sound all scary. Who is Bloody Mary? Hopefully, you know, not, but you likely would have been suckered into a bit of legend by saying, "Who's Bloody Mary? What's Bloody Mary? Who's Bloody Mary?" You know, say Bloody Mary 3 times into a mirror, you'll be greeted with a rather startling image of Mary's reflection in the mirror behind you. Different retellings of the story over and over, different versions of the tales of what happens. Some Bloody Mary quite literally dripping in blood when she appears behind you. Others telling of her dragging you away if you turn around to look at her in person, as well as more, tales that talk of violent murders and blood pouring from traps. So there's a lot of different twists and turns with it. The one that I grew up with was, you would say Bloody Mary 3 times in the mirror while holding a candle, or you would flick the light switch off and on each time you say it. When you turn it on that final time and you say it, she appears in the mirror. If you turn around to look at her, she would take your soul or leave you bloody. That was the one that I grew up with and what I heard. So is Bloody Mary real? Well, some people think so. Based on the story of which Mary Worth, it's fair to say that Bloody Mary's history is long and extremely bloodied. Many people already believe that Mary was a witch, simply because she lived in the forest in a small cabin and was known around the local village for selling tinctures and herbal remedies. And for those of you who don't know what tinctures are, that's Tinctures. They were like elixirs that were made. Southern people back in the day would call them elixirs, and they would take roots from certain roots and certain barks from trees and berries and things, and they would boil them into and mix them with I think it was vinegar and or alcohol, and they were remedies to cure. Now, the local people in the village where she was were very weary of her and were afraid of her because that's a form of magic to them. It's not a true medicine from a doctor. It's a herbal remedy, and, so it was a concoction or a potion, so to them it was a form of magic. So they were weary and they didn't want to get too close for her, fearful that you get too close to a witch, then she would put a curse on them or their animals, and, and those who did choose to use her remedies were sometimes shunned by the people that were very religious in the villages for them partaking into Wicca, because it was a form of Wicca. And if you know about witches and magic, it's Wiccan. There's a lot of Wiccans out there, which are not bad. That's a time for another show. We could talk about the different types of witches and witchcraft and all. White magic, black magic, and the types of magic is candle magic and, crystals and, the druids and things like that. So there's a lot of different things. So anyway, I practiced Wiccan for a long time, for many years, way back. But anyway, to get on with the story, after a while, there were, in the village, small girls started to go missing. And the people in the village started looking everywhere for these kids, and they couldn't find them. A few brave people would actually go to the cabin and confront, Mary, and ask her if she knew everything. But of course, she denied all knowledge of the girls' disappearances. The families were still suspicious, especially because her unusually elderly and haggard appearance had drastically started to change, and she was starting to appear more feminine and youthful. The villagers really became suspicious of that, but there wasn't much they could do because there was no proof. The Bloody Mary story, it continues over to the Miller's daughter. There was a farming family there called the Millers, and there was a husband and wife, and they had a little daughter. And one night, the little girl was captivated by some mysterious noise that only she could hear. It was in her head. And her mom was sitting up, treating a bad toothache this particular night. And as luck would have it, she was using, by the way, a herbal tincture that she had bought from Mary. Okay? So, and that's what she was using. Now, Miss Miller started to get frantic because she saw her daughter walking, and it was at nighttime. And, you know, she got scared and she shouted for a couple of times and she didn't answer. So then she yelled for her husband. And her husband came and began to follow her daughter, you know, his daughter. And while he was following her, he shouted to her daughter for her to come, you know, back, but to no avail. So, as it was almost though she was following an unspoken or unseen force, you know, they couldn't get her to turn around or anything. She just kept walking like in a trance. So they were getting the town, you know, some of the other people from the village were hearing the commotion, and the town folks all were coming to try to help. The farmer noticed that there was a light at the edge of the woods. When they got closer, as they were following the little girl, as they got closer, they noticed again that Mary Worth was standing in a clearing next to a huge oak tree. She was holding a wand, pointing it towards Miller's home, and was almost glowing in this unnatural light. And the Miller's daughter was headed straight toward that light. So now people ask, what is Bloody Mary? It's kind of hard to answer, particularly because witches typically don't have wands, believe it or not, or a glow with an unnatural light. So it's fair to say that most people imagine her as a witch, but some other type of supernatural being. And once the farmers and Miller's father noticed just what Mary Worth was doing, they set out to get her, and some of them, you know, had pitchforks, they had guns, and they set out to get her. You know, and Mary broke and went into the woods and started running through the woods. Well, she wasn't quite quick enough. This is how she died. She wasn't quite quick enough. One farmer quickly was, you know, unloading and you know, his gun, and he managed to shoot her. Now, some say that he was using silver bullets. Back in these days, in the 1600s, you know, witchcraft, witchery, and werewolves and all these stories were very real to these people. They believed in the devil. They believed in, you know, magic. They believed in a lot of the stuff. So silver, being a pure metal, you know, was supposed to kill certain things. So they, you know, would make a lot of their bullets out of silver, and keep them on hand for such type of things. Well, one of the shots he fired had caught her in the hip. And she, you know, when she was caught, she was kicking and thrashing around and screaming and everything. Well, they managed to subdue her, and they tied her to a stake, set a bonfire, and lit her on fire. While she was burning, she was screaming and yelling, and as she was screaming, she had said that she set a curse upon the village, and she told them that if they ever dared to utter her name in a mirror, she would be back for them. Her spirit would return to wherever they summoned her from, to exact her revenge. Now, to further the story, you know, unfortunately for the villagers with the missing children, when they got back home to the village, they returned to Mary's house and did a proper search because they still felt suspicious. What they found was really bad. They found a lot of rows and rows of unmarked graves with the bodies of all the missing children. As they searched further through the house, they found pickle jars, you know, size jars, you know, the pickle jars. They found them full of blood, and they assumed that it was the blood from the kids, and she was using the blood in her potions to make herself more youthful. So, and of course, you know, it didn't end there. You know, the curse, the Bloody Mary legend doesn't quite end there. However, the most common version of the legend states that if you chant her name 3 times in a mirror, you'll summon Bloody Mary's ghost. And one of the legends, which is the oldest legend, is that she'll, when she comes there and you see her, she will be taking your soul. She'll take your soul for her own, and, you know, ripping you to shreds in the process, and she'll leave your soul to burn. Just like she was burned at the stake, for you to feel her pain and her suffering. So that's the story of Bloody Mary and how it came to be. And that was in the 1600s. So that's how long, that's been around. And now that you know that story, you're probably going to think twice before looking in a mirror and chanting her name 3 times, So that's the story of Bloody Mary. I always found it fascinating, when you dig into these urban legends and really find out, some of the stories behind them, and how they really became to be. Because again, as I said earlier on, there's always some truth behind every urban legend. There's some truth behind almost every scary story that we would hear when we were kids around a campfire. I know we all heard the story of the one where the guy with the hook escapes from an insane asylum, kills a couple kids who were making out in their car. Believe it or not, that was real. People use that as a scary story, but it is real. I'll tell you another one. And a lot of people don't realize this and don't know this, but the movie It, about the killer clown. And then, of course, we have Pennywise, which came from the movie It that Stephen King had written or produced, and everything he wrote and produced. John Wayne Gacy was actually the real killer clown in real life back in the 60s and 70s. And that was the inspiration for the story. John Wayne Gacy, I'll tell you real quick a story about him. John Wayne Gacy was born March 17th, 1942. He died May 10th, 1994. He was the ultimate American serial killer and sex offender who raped and tortured and murdered at least 33 that they know of. 33 young men and boys, all kids. He regularly performed at children's hospitals and charitable events as Pogo the Clown or Patches the Clown. They were personas that he had devised, he made up. He became known as the Killer Clown due to his public services as a clown prior to discovery of his crimes. Gacy committed all of the murders inside his ranch-style house, which was near Norridge, a village of Norwood Park Township in suburban Chicago. Typically, he would lure the victims into his home. He would dupe them into putting on handcuffs as a pretext that he was going to demonstrate a magic trick. He would then rape and torture them, before killing them, and he killed them by strangulation. They got 26 victims were buried in his crawl space of his home, and 3 others were buried elsewhere on his property. 4 were discarded in the Des Plaines River. Now, he was convicted of sodomy of a teenage boy in Waterloo, Iowa in 1968. But they believe that he began murdering even before then. He was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment for this sodomy, but served only 18 months. His first murder victim that they could actually prove was in 1972. He murdered twice. He murdered twice more by the end of 1975, and murdered at least 33 victims after his divorce from his second wife in 1976. So he was a really bad guy. He was convicted for 33 murders by one individual, which then covered the most homicide in the United States legal history by any one person. Gacy was sentenced to death on March 13th, 1980. He sat on death row until May 10th, 1994, when he was executed by lethal injection. So that's the story of John Wayne Gacy. And so now when you watch the movie It, or Pennywise, you'll think of John Wayne Gacy, and look him up. Again, anything I tell you on this show, I have already researched, I've already looked up, and it is fact. Now, again, when it comes to the Bloody Mary story, you can probably find different variations of it and different things of it. There was a Queen Mary 1, I think it was, back in the 1500s or late 1500s, that was also noted as being linked to the Bloody Mary legend. But Mary Worth was actually the real Bloody Mary legend. So urban legends can be a lot of fun, but remember, there's always some truth to every urban legend. You know, I have found from doing a little bit of research that every state, believe it or not, has their own urban legends. One of the real creepy ones that I found was in Alabama. It's called the Dead Children's Playground. And why is it creepy? The Erie Playground, adjacent to the Maple Hill, Huntsville's oldest cemetery. It doesn't just have an eerie nickname for fun. The playground was presumably designed to entertain kids while their parents visited the graves of loved ones. And legend has it, though, that the spirits of the children who have been buried in the cemetery since the grave was first dug there in 1822, they come out at night to play. Kids that were buried there come out at night to play, their spirits. The living people that live there said they have observed and reported orbs of light going down the slides. They've seen swings moving on their own, and they've even heard giggling when no one was around. Creepier still, some say the spirits include victims of a rash of child murders that happened in the 60s, when the bodies were rumored to have been found in the area and now houses the playground. Where does it come from? The playground itself wasn't open until 1985, so you can imagine how much pent-up energy and tiny spirits had after 160 years without a slide. In 2007, the city tried to raise the park to make more room for graves and remove the slides and swings overnight. After public outcry, it was replaced with more modern equipment, making it slightly less creepy to look at and also probably resulting in some happier ghosts. So think about a playground that's on top of a burial cemetery, burial grounds. So there's a lot of different legends, urban legends out there that really, are creepy. Arizona has one called the Skinwalkers. Now this is one that actually is a lot of detail. There's a lot to the Skinwalkers out in Arizona. This is one that could be discussed along with the aliens. There's actually a place out in Arizona that you're nowhere near allowed to go near this place in Arizona. A lot of strange things have happened. So getting into the Skinwalkers is a different one, but that's in Arizona. There's just a lot of different things, a lot of different legends. So, comment below and tell me what legend scares you the most, or what legend freaked you out the most when you were a kid, or maybe even still does. And we can dig into it and find out, what it's really all about. I'll tell you one, a lot of you maybe watching are from Delaware. There's one called Mr. Chew. Mr. Chew, C-H-E-W. Why is it creepy? Samuel Chew was a respected man, a chief justice in the state back in the colonial days. Still, even in colonial America, boys latched onto his name, constantly proclaiming, Chew, Chew, as if, they're sneezing and making fun of him. He apparently hated it so much that his spirit still stalks those who mock him, showing up in robes and powdered wig to scare, even the loving crap out of people who can't resist the easy joke at his expense, centuries, centuries there. Where does it come from? Chu was very much a real man. He was real. This is derived from a real. And I said, all legends come from something real. So he was a real man serving as the Chief Justice of the 3 lower counties until he died in 1743. Now, things go so unsettling that people eventually held a funeral for the ghost in Dover's Green. Everybody knows Dover's Green. It's right in the heart of Dover. Trying to lay his spirit to rest in an ornate grave. He seemed to be placed, though he's still known to mess with smartasses who sneeze and mention his name. Chu. So you don't want to joke, especially if you're around Delaware. But that's a Delaware one. There were some other ones for Delaware and things. So, there's just a lot of neat legends out there. And I think those things are kind of neat, especially when you dig into finding out, as I've been saying, where the legends derive from, how they get started. They all get started from something that's really happened. So there's always some truth to every legend. Just that as the years go by, the stories kind of change a little bit, things get twisted, some get added. But if you go and research and you dig deep enough, you can find out the truth. And let's just say that sometimes it's better off left alone. Sometimes what you find is more frightening than just the actual legend itself. Sometimes finding out the truth is actually scarier than the legend itself, because then you find out what the truth is about it. So, again, down in the comments, tell me what your urban legend or story scared you the most, and let's see if we can dig into it and find out what the truth is behind it and how it began. So, thank you for watching this episode of The Edge. I hope it didn't scare you too much. It doesn't give you too many nightmares. And again, please subscribe so we can keep this going. Have a good night. Thank you very much. And remember, don't look in the mirror and don't say that name 3 times, because you might not like what you see. And better yet, or worse, you may not come out. Have a good night.